with the new Indiana Jones movie coming out, we both ended up watching the whole series again, right? You watched all
Yes.
four movies.
Yeah.
Um, I thought it would be a good time to sort of go back and do a little retrospective on the whole series. Which honestly, I always liked India. It's not like I was agnostic about the thing, but I didn't really realize how much I love these movies or how much I just love the vibe of the character and the adventure and everything. Really until this summer of rewatching everything. But I thought it'd be fun to sort of go back and like go back to 1981. Did you see the first movie in the theater, Kurt?
I did see it in the theater.
Okay. What was that
Yeah,
experience like? I mean, I assume you weren't following Spielberg's filmography and thinking about like, oh wow, what is he going to do after the financial disaster of 1941?
I
You were just a little kid, I assume, but
no, yeah, I was very deeply concerned about his career for this up and coming. No, I had no idea about any of that. I was just going to see another movie, and uh, I'd be curious what, like, we have the older guys in our film club, the older people in our film club, what they think of it, because for me, I hadn't seen a movie like that. I hadn't seen serials like that before, and so
right.
it was this sort of, I don't know, high grade serial movie, high budget, well executed, incredible movie. And so I was totally on board. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know movies were like this, but I remember my parents and other people talking about, like, oh yeah, no, this is movies were like this, or this is based on these old movies or whatever. And I think this is where Star Wars and this movie were like, you know I started watching behind the scenes stuff because I was like, how they do that boulder, how they do
Yeah.
that.
And,
um,
and the thing about those older movies is, I mean, I don't know if I've watched too many like classic adventure movies. I always watch Adventures of Robin Hood. That's a great old movie, but um, I assume they were not as breakneck and stylized, and certainly not as violent as Raiders. Was that scary to you as a kid? Because when I saw it, I don't know how old I was. I might have been 10 or something, and my parents brought me in like this would be another fun movie to watch. And I was very disturbed by it. As soon as they brought in but Alfred Molina, he gets impaled by the spikes. I was like, oh hell no, hell no. That freaked me out. But for you, was it scary? Do you remember?
it was. I'm not remembering exactly the timeline, but I mean, like, Road Warrior came out that same year. I didn't see that year, but like I don't think that was that strange. I don't know.
Mhm.
I was a little freaked out, and I think the only scene that really got me was the melting faces of the Nazis. And that, I mean, that's so. I mean, it's wonderful because it's so, like, clearly this is fake. This is not these are not real human beings with their faces getting melted or whatever. I mean, as a kid, I was, maybe a little bit like, I have candles. Yeah,
Right,
I could
right.
do, maybe. Yeah, like, I don't know. That one didn't mess me up. It was Temple of Doom. It was Temple of Doom that messed me up. Mola Ram pulling that guy's heart out of his chest. I was like, oh, and then Indy hits short round. I mean,
Oh my
those are
god. No,
that was that.
it's so upsetting. I mean, that's still upsetting when I watch it now. And
Yeah.
I never saw Temple of Doom as a kid because I think my parents just told me, "Oh, that's the one where a guy's heart gets pulled out." And as a guy who was scared by the first movie, I was like, "I'm not going to ever watch that." And I think I only watched it about maybe 6 years ago or something. Um, but yeah, Raiders is sort of interesting because I think it was scary enough, and I remember watching some of it. Like I remember watching the truck chase, and like the truck going over the guy, and you see his legs go up in the air, and it was sort of freaked me out. But I wanted to watch it over again. But like I never watched the finale, and I think that I didn't think I watched the whole movie until many years later, but it was like scenes I would rewatch. I'd put the DVD in and I would
Mm.
watch. So I think I've seen the shootout scene at the bar and the truck chase like 50 times, but the whole movie I've only seen maybe 3 or 4 times, including the couple, months ago when I rewatched it. So I don't have as much of a relationship to it. And obviously, I don't know, it feels sacrilegious to say anything negative about it, but it was kind of Last Crusade, which was the one for me as a kid growing up. Like that was the one that they showed us, and I think it's a little bit less disturbing. It's a little bit more lighthearted and upbeat and funny, and that went into the sort of canon of movies, the very small group of movies that Kazu and I would rewatch over and over again. The Pixar movies, Star Wars movies, Back to the Future, and Last Crusade. Though I will say, at the end when the guy that the is the decapitation and and then his Donovan taking the potion or whatever, that I never saw that till many years later, because I was always hiding behind the couch. This is like a theme of me as a child watching movies.
That's adorable.
Yeah, I was like, for huge swaths of the movie. I mean, there's the famous story of me seeing The Incredibles at Pixar, like one of the best theaters you could see a movie. I watched the entire thing between the crack of the doors because I was just so terrified. And that, it's like a PG rated movie.
Wow. So that's how you know it's working?
In a way, yeah. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have been doing that for the second one. It's not nearly as... And there's a certain thing I feel like is a little bit lost in modern movies, of these movies that are like for kids, and they sell toys, Indiana Jones toys, and it's connected to a kid audience, but people would never make a movie, even Last Crusade wouldn't make a movie that hardcore, and have Hitler in a movie, and a guy turning into a skeleton. I mean, just these sort of things that are scary. It feels like the edges are sanded off a little bit of newer movies, I think.
I mean, I think this is, there's a transition period, I feel like, in movie making, where the studios were like, we don't know what makes good movies, like it's just sort of it's random, it's chance, it's roulette or whatever. And then this is like getting into where they're like, oh, we got formulas now we know how to make movies, now we know how to make successful movies. And so I feel like this is kind of on the cusp of that. I feel like, yeah, Spielberg was largely responsible for that, I guess, with Jaws, and yeah, not like intentionally, but like people were like, oh yeah,
this is what we want to see. And he did. Yeah. I mean, he did push it too far with Temple of Doom. I mean, I can't even imagine you. I mean, we were like 12 seeing that movie, right, or something around that age. You just were traumatized, I assume, and
complete. Yeah, like really freaked out. Like Indy's drinking blood, and there's the big heavy guy. There's the monkey brains. I mean, yeah, all sorts of stuff that was just stomach turning and terrifying. That's a dark. I don't know. So I've come to appreciate it more over the years, but it's taken me a while. My friend was like, "No, I like Dial of Destiny better than Temple of Doom," because I think he's still got that built-in bias from having seen it too young.
I understand that, honestly, because it probably has the worst vibes of any of the 5 movies, just in terms of it's so mean-spirited and unpleasant, and honestly maybe a little bit racist in some of the Indian stuff, and just the violence, and also just the emotional aspect of it, of like short round him, this little kid, and seeing Indy possessed like that. Very, very upsetting. And the heart pulling out of the chest is like the visual remember, but there's others, like seeing this guy get incinerated in the pits of hell. It was just, I think everyone sort of has this line now, but it's like, it is the movie made by people who are in a bad place in their lives, and at least in one of their cases, going through a breakup, and just sort of putting all of their hateful, mean-spirited thoughts into one movie. And I guess it was so, upsetting to people that it started. Enough people complained that they had to implement the PG-13, which honestly, I'm kind of surprised it's not an R movie. I guess it may be just a testament to the first movie being PG, and they didn't want to like lose the younger audience, but I don't know.
I was biased against it, definitely. And I mean, like, after Last Crusade, it was definitely Raider, in terms of my ranking, it was Raiders, Last Crusade, and then Temple of Doom was down the list before Crystal Skull came out, which I don't know if we're even allowed to talk about that movie.
No, we'll talk. We're going to talk about it.
No, but watching it again, it's like, no, this is pretty good. it's just a dark movie, and I don't think that I definitely did not have the sophistication to appreciate a dark movie at that point. I mean, like, yeah, when I saw it, for sure, it was just like,
Yeah.
there was a lot of stuff that was freaking me out, and yeah, honestly, Willie's not a character that's easy to like get into, like compared to Marion, because like as a Star Wars kid, like I want my Princess Leia, I want my
Yeah,
toughest name.
yeah, cool lady, not some screaming idiot. Yeah, that's
But
honestly,
but I mean, she overcomes that fear and becomes heroic, which is like a thing that I have come to appreciate later in life. Like oh, okay, well, you know what, Willie's like I'd still prefer a Marion, but Willie's got something going for. I don't know. Yeah,
I know I felt that more on the rewatch. It was interesting watching these again and
yeah,
seeing, because honestly, my take is that all of these movies are some degree of good. I think good ranging from pretty good fun to hands down masterpiece, one of my favorite movies ever. In the case of Last Crusade, but it's sort of interesting that each one has different things I like more. Like Last Crusade, I have the most affection for, but I kind of like the look and the sinister feel of the first two movies. And the first one, rewatching it, it's just, I mean, one of the most beautiful looking movies ever made. It's hilarious seeing people. I just saw this thing online that someone used an AI to expand the frame of different scenes of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is just such a ridiculous idea because it's so perfectly, everything in the movie is perfectly framed. The idea
yeah,
of yeah,
yeah,
turning it into like a video game looking thing is kind of silly, but
yeah,
um
yeah.
it just, yeah, it looks incredible. Yeah, Marion is great. The whole duo you have there is fantastic.
I like not really understand. I mean, as a kid, I definitely did not understand what the heck was going on, and now as an adult, it's like, oh, like I think it was probably right around when one of the teachers at my high school was getting into trouble for mixing it up with a younger woman. That
Oh, in
that
high school?
yeah,
Oh,
that I
that's too
connected the
bad.
dots, and I was like, I think that's what Indiana, and that teacher was definitely no young Harrison Ford.
No.
But yeah, like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't. I was okay with roguish characters.
And that's the
Yeah,
other thing that's sort of funny is like there's some, I feel like, in more a more modern period, people start to go a little bit more like, is this character kind of, a dicey human being, and is he sort of just like a grave robber? Like, he has this excuse of it, belongs to a museum, all that sort of thing, but is this really, should we be rooting for this guy? And it used to be in my head was like, no, he's a noble character, he's the greatest man ever. But actually there's sort of a fun of that, the cynicism of his character, and that he is kind of doing this, either for greed or just for the thrill of it, or kind of as the third movie gets at, he's doing it for the approval of his father and for kind of trying to, um, sort of gain his attention, as you see in that opening with River Phoenix. Um, so I don't know. Again, that's another thing I feel like a lesson we could learn from these movies in modern movies is like, it's okay to have a main character who's kind of an asshole or kind of a little bit. I mean, I feel I'm glad they didn't go with the Marion was whatever 13 or 4. Like they had something that was really really sketchy that in my head canon, because all they say is she says I was a child, and in my head I just say okay, she was in college, like like I try to justify it a little bit, but yeah, it's a little, it's dancing along the line for sure, even with what they ended up going with in the movie. Um, but I don't know, the two of them are so great together, and Karen Allen is so fantastic that I'm,
so dynamite. Yeah, yeah.
and I that that shootout thing that I watch over and over again is still so thrilling and brilliantly staged.
That scene, yeah, definitely. Like when I was a kid, it was all about the boulder, how they do that, the melting faces, like the snakes and the plexiglass, the cobra, and all this, like all of that stuff. I was fascinated by. Watching it as an adult now, I'm really able to appreciate. Damn, that's some great editing and some great just filmmaking. That scene, the shootout scene at what's her bar called, the Raven's Loft or whatever. I can't
Oh
remember.
yeah, I forget what it's called. Also, the drinking contest thing is great too,
Yes.
and a great
Yeah.
setup for later in the movie, and yeah,
Oh,
fantastic.
that great oneer where yeah, like where it tracks with her hand back to her mouth and then follow. Yeah, just how brilliant that cinematography and that storytelling is in that. Just perfect pacing.
Yeah, no,
No,
it's was it?
I was about to go off on the score because I just remembered that. Yeah,
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't neglect to
um,
talk about the music because it's great. No, it is
super
interesting
bad.
in that scene. He pulls out the music completely when the
Yeah,
bullets start flying, and it's equally effective. Um, but yeah, so much of the movie is carried by either the romantic sweep or that like action music, or that there's some of the music you forget about, like the driving, like repetitive music you hear in the desert truck scene, which is probably, is that the best scene in the movie? It might be my favorite, like one of the best action scenes probably in any movie. And I
yeah,
still, whether or not, I mean, there's definitely some stunt double stuff going on, but whoever that is going, there's a guy going under a truck. I mean, that's not fake. That's
yeah.
unbelievable. And there's also stuff where you start to notice. I never noticed until I'm watching it like the 100th time that there's maybe one shot where it's Indy hanging on, but it's really like a dummy or something. And certainly in Temple of Doom, there's a minecart chase that there's tons of stop motion or dummies or whatever, or sometimes just like puppets that are just awkwardly moving back and forth. But it's so brilliantly edited. It didn't even occur to me I'm watching this that it's puppet. Like, even though I'm like, oh, obviously, if I thought about it for a second, I'd be obviously they're not throwing them through this mine shaft. But it's like
Yeah.
I'm watching it like it's real because it's so seamlessly done. Um,
If somebody hasn't already, and it's very probable that somebody has, but somebody should break down that mining cart sequence and just be like stop motion, scale replica, force perspective, back rear projection. Just break down all the techniques as they go through those, as fast as they go through them, because it is rapid fire and I don't know, it definitely was seamless back then. Yeah.
yeah, and also the rear projection, that is, I mean, maybe it's just partly it's dark, it works a little better, but it again didn't occur to me that it's like, oh yeah, of course they're on rear projection, but just brilliant stuff. Um,
Yeah.
it's interesting, these first movies where he worked with this guy, the cinematographer Douglas Slocum, who he never worked with in any other. He just made those three movies with him, and he was this old guy who, it's funny, it connects to our film club because he shot like Kind Hearts and Coronets and Lavender Hill
Oh,
Mob,
wow.
and
Oh,
also The Servant. Like all these old like British movies,
yeah, yeah.
which are cool looking movies. And
I
then
had no idea that was the same guy. That's so crazy. Wow.
yeah, he's part of the Ealing cabal. Yeah, and then they Spielberg scoops him up just for this one. But it's incredible. Have you ever seen the Steven Soderbergh re-edit of Raiders where he made it black and white? You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
I heard about that. I don't think I ever watched it or anything.
It's
Yeah.
just on his website. It's just the movie with no sound, and he puts the Social Network score on it for some reason, and it's in black and white. Because I think it was just sort of to demonstrate the purity of the staging and the images of the movie, because it is just absolutely gorgeous. If I have any now, forgive me for if this is blasphemous, but I always felt like with Raiders, if I have any negative thing to say about it, because it's pretty delightful to watch. Do you feel like the ending is a little bit anticlimactic? I mean, it was pretty cool to watch. I mean, it's pretty cool to see the Nazis, get their just desserts, of course. But I always felt like it was a little bit. It might be just the post high of the desert truck chase that it's a
Hmm.
little bit of a. I don't know. It just is, to me. It's not quite as satisfying as like the Temple of Doom, finale on the bridge, or the getting the Grail. There's a little bit more
Yeah, no,
activity.
it's
He's a little more central to it as opposed to just being tied up. Um,
yeah, a little more literal Deus Ex Machina or whatever. Deus Ex Ark of the Covenant. I don't know what they call
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, he's sort of. I don't know. That's why I always thought as a kid. I always put it a little bit lower in my Spielberg like rankings. I will say, watching the last time I watched it though, a couple months ago, I did appreciate that there is character stuff going on in terms of the moment where he has to
Yeah.
blow up the Ark, and he has
Go
the
ahead.
bazooka.
Yeah, yeah. But Locke's like, yeah, shoot it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead. And Indy, he can't bring himself to do it. And then just the thing of like, close your eyes, Marion, that sort of thing, which in a way actually, when we get to the fifth movie, connects to that a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a good. I shouldn't slander it too much. I just, for whatever reason, it's never been. I don't even know if I put in my top 10 Spielberg, which is maybe odd, but
Well, that yeah, you've got a weird top 10 Spielberg.
I mean, yeah, Bridge of Spies is out of the top 10, by the way, for anyone who wants to know. That's
All
uh
right.
I have, but yeah, I like some of the newer ones a lot. I put Minority Report very high and what have you, but no, it's obviously great. Temple of Doom was weird to watch again because I'd only seen it once, and I was pretty mixed on it. I remember thinking the finale was fantastic, but it was kind of, I guess I found Willie annoying, and I thought it was like a little bit. I mean, just tonally. There's also kind of a conventional way of thinking about movies where it's like they're supposed to be consistent, and the movie where the tone is so wildly. I mean, it's so silly and goofy, and there's that whole thing where they're running into each other's bedrooms, and it's almost like juvenile. And then to go from that to genuinely one of the scariest sequences I've ever seen in a movie, and not just scary but also upsetting. And then to just like kind of George Miller-esque, well, it feels like it's like a 40-minute sequence. I mean, basically from Marion getting low or Willie getting lowered into the lava,
Yeah.
it plays out in real time, which I don't think that is the case with any of the rest of these movies. So
I couldn't remember the structure of that till this most recent rewatching, and was like just marveling at how they made that exciting for a very long time. That was a very long action sequence and exciting, climactic, little telling the little stories of going the wrong path and the water and getting to the bridge. I mean, it was great. Yeah,
yeah,
impressive.
and I think I just think it works. I mean, did you feel like it was better on a rewatch than you remembered? Because or did
Oh
you
yeah.
always like it?
No, I mean, I didn't always like it. No. I mean, when it came out, it was like, no, that one's so dark. And then, when Last Crusade came out and it was so accessible, it was, had great humor and the charm with, between Indy and them competing over Ilsa. That was wonderful. It was they just had such, it was very easy to get into that movie. I feel like maybe Temple of Doom. I mean, I feel that way, but I feel that way about Empire Strikes Back too. I mean, I don't know, like where it took a while for me to really come to appreciate. Like, no, Empire Strikes Back is a really, really good movie. It's just darker than the first movie. I don't know how you feel about Star Wars movies, but it took me a while before I was really able to get my head around. No, Temple of Doom's actually really well done. Really, all the mastery that you saw in the first movie is there. It's just a little darker in tone. Yeah.
I think that's interesting you say that about Empire, because when you first said that, I was like, you're out of your mind. Empire is the best one, because that's obviously my take as a 26-year-old person. But as a kid, if I'm being honest, I think I don't know this for certain because I wasn't keeping a film log back then, but I'm pretty sure that I watched Jedi and the original Star Wars the most times, just because whenever I watch them, I'm like, I've seen this a million times. Empire Strikes Back, I don't feel like that, because it's not as fun as a kid. You're just like, this is kind of a bummer, and it's a little bit slow and weird. And then as an adult, I'm like, well, this is absolute one of the great films ever made. I'm not going to say wouldn't say that about Temple of Doom. This is not. And then I certainly put it below the first and third.
No, I just mean in the sense that Empire is a much darker tone, from in a franchise that has I wouldn't say that Star Wars is an especially happy-go-lucky franchise, but it's Raiders is much more upbeat and sort of, I don't know, captures that adventurous. I don't know. I don't know. I can't put my finger on that because it was such a formative movie for me. And Last Crusade, I feel like, is really like nailing that, just hitting it out of the park in terms of like, oh, that's what we're doing. We're making that movie. And yeah, Temple of Doom. I don't know. Maybe it's the Brian De Palma in me or whatever.
Uh,
Where it felt like he was pushing the envelope. He was trying something. He was trying something a little different and trying. Uh, I have come to appreciate movies where it's like, yeah, it doesn't. Maybe it didn't quite work as a movie, but it was very interesting. We did this, yeah.
and it is interesting that he kind of, it was such a, I mean, he's kind of disowned the movie, or at least he personally is like, I don't really like that movie, Spielberg. And he's never really gone to that place again. At, certainly not in terms of that kind of ugly and horrifying. And it seems like his only way of going there is through the historical, through like Munich or Schindler's List or something like that, where it feels more appropriate or more, no one's going to question you making a horrifying movie about the Holocaust. So it's like that's the place for him to do it. But I don't know. I mean, I think his movies are great, and he's one of the few directors who's basically maintained the same level of greatness for like 50 years. So it's hard to complain, but it would be interesting to see him go back, which I don't think he will as a 76-year-old man, but it would have been interesting to see if he did another, horror movie or something like that. And it's certainly, I don't know. I felt like watching it again, and I've had this, because I've been rewatching a lot of his movies, post Fablemans and West Side Story, and a lot of movies I at the time thought were kind of, I was mixed about. I watch and I go, oh, this is pretty good, but when's the other shoe gonna drop, And then it just never, like War of the Worlds, I thought when I always thought was kind of mixed, and when I watched that again, I was just like, this is just a good movie. I mean, I think it's a little bit, it's imperfect, and I think it's kind of, it's a little bit like the last quarter of the movie is a little weaker than the rest, but I mean, it's.
I haven't seen that recently enough. I didn't like it. I remember not liking it. I mean, I think I did see it in the theater. Yeah,
I
I
think,
should. There's
yeah, I
some. I
think.
mean, this just for some of those shots where it's like, how'd they do that? I should
Oh
watch it
yeah,
for that.
no, it's some of the best, like also like CGI integration, and or when the plane goes down. Anyway, this is not a War of the World podcast, but it's
Yeah, it's not,
pretty impressive, and
in terms of
uh,
tone, though. Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. Where it's pretty nihilistic in War of the Worlds,
oh
and
no, I don't even mean just the tone. I'll even talking about the post or other movies. I can't think if I had another
hmm,
where I've watched it going like, this is
okay,
this is one of the mediocre ones, and then I watched the whole thing. I'm like, didn't have a problem with that. That was pretty fun to me. And even
yeah.
stuff like Willie, who I kind of thought of as like the Jar Jar Binks of the series. I mean, definitely, you know,
Come on,
yeah,
not
not,
that.
not that bad, but like probably, I mean, still, I'd
That's
say probably,
Spielberg's wife. You're talking, yeah, no.
yeah. I mean, she's not, definitely, like if I was ranking how much I like the characters of those movies, she'd be pretty low. But I don't know. I actually found some of this stuff pretty funny, and her banter with Harrison Ford. It was
Definitely,
kind of
yeah.
charming. It's charming in a different way. Obviously, Karen Allen is the goat. Like you can't top Karen. Like she's just so great. So it's, but it was pretty fun. And then also just I think I was riding a little the post Everything Everywhere All at Once thing with Short Round, and seeing Ke Huy Quan, so much in the last year. Going
So
back to him
I
as a
didn't. I
kid.
never caught this. Sorry, but this go through. I did want to call that one thing with Q. Huy Quan. Short Round. He's imitating in some of those early sequences. He's doing.
Yeah,
He's and he moves back and he moves back. And
yeah.
kind
And
of
he's wearing his hat at one point, right? And he kind of goes like,
yeah,
strokes his chin
yeah,
or
exactly.
something. Really good stuff. Really
That
good.
was great. That was terrific. Yeah, just little subtle stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing about Spielberg. And when we talk about Spielberg versus Kim Mangold directing this series, Spielberg always is doing these like little things. He has these little bits or gags or like little um tiny things you don't even realize on the first viewing that just add something to the movie. And I'm sure like him saying like, oh yeah, sure, Key, if you do this, it's funnier if you imitate this, and you might not even, it's not even in focus in the shot, but it just adds something, and it adds something to their character and how much he, emulates and loves Indy. And I got pretty like emotional in those scenes in the middle of the movie where he saves Indy, because it's quite harrowing, and and it's well acted by the little kid. I mean, he's great.
Yeah. Yeah. There aren't a lot of child actors that really made an impression, but I don't know, like all through high school, growing up and everything, we would talk about Short Round. And, not really, I mean, we didn't do any research to figure out whatever happened to that guy or whatever, but it was delightful when he came back and was so phenomenal in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So, yeah.
I think the one thing we agree about that movie, honestly, that how great he is. Because I'm on the record as a little mixed about the movie, but he was wonderful. It was that was the
That's,
Oscar I had no debate about. I think, but
no, no, yeah, he was great. Yeah, I have come around to appreciate a lot more things in Temple than I thought I ever would, honestly. Yeah,
yeah, I think just that finale and everything, and on the bridge, and oh, and then him like cutting the bridge, and he's talking in Chinese to Short Round is like just fantastic. Great filmmaking. Also the callback where he is the, like he's
yeah,
gonna pull the gun
goes,
on the two swordsmen, and then the gun's not there. Great stuff.
yeah.
Great stuff. Even though I guess this is there's a weird thing about this movie, Temple of Doom being a prequel, which I almost, is there a reason for that, or did they just make a mistake when they put the year at the beginning? I can't remember if there's some.
I don't know, but I think it's really interesting. I definitely did not connect that dot until way late, like maybe, I don't know, 4 years ago. Somebody told me that, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah, no, I mean just an odd aspect of the movie, but yeah, these first two really are kind of like the some of the best examples of like when Scorsese is talking about, like movies as theme park rides or roller coasters. This is
yeah,
these two. I mean, and the second movie literally becomes a roller coaster at a certain
yeah,
point. Um, but it's like it's the best example, the highest crafted example of that. Um,
yeah." No, I I do feel like, yeah, some of the Marvel movies maybe, they watch some of these, because Guardians is, it's fun and it's silly sometimes, and it's also exciting adventure. Like I feel like tonally, definitely Raiders was something. I mean, not that everybody wasn't trying to make Raiders, but I do feel like, yeah,
Yeah, and it's not, they're not big on character. Like there's a little bit of, there's a just, it's like just enough
exactly.
to carry it through in terms of, which I didn't always as a kid really pick up on that at all. But there's a little bit going on in the first movie of him, his like cynicism about the religious, artifacts, and these like supernatural powers, and also his kind of um what would you call it, capitalistic interest in these artifacts, and sort of him having, I guess what you might call like kind of a little bit of a understanding of the actual significance of the things he's messing with. um and the second one, I get there's a little bit of the, like, he's chasing fortune and glory, he's chasing the things, but he's really, at the end of the movie, he goes back around because he hears the children being whipped, and he's like, oh no, I can't stand for this. And it's just a little bit, very very small, but it feels like the third one was the one where he really, or Spielberg and the writers and Lucas were, there's like it feels like the most character based, and the most kind of like there's a real character arc between the two of them, him and Sean Connery. And I think that's, for me, why it's the most satisfying, even though I think there are things I would put about that movie beneath the other, like the visuals, for example, of the, I actually think the second movie might be unbeatable in terms of the visuals and the visual variety. That was the thing I wanted to say, just the whole, going from this James Bond opening to like a Busby Berkeley number for no reason whatsoever other than it's just cool,
Yeah,
um, to Italian horror, and then this sort of like George Miller vision of the racing through the
yeah,
carts. Um,
yeah.
it's really pretty impressive, and I don't know if all three movies look great, but I'm not sure if it's as memorable visuals in the third one, and also
So
like, oh, go ahead.
no, I have a little bit of a pet theory here. Having worked on some film sets, it is really fun to improvise with, but particularly when you have really good performance. It's really fun to try some stuff out and move stuff around. I think as you become more and more successful, my pet theory is that Steven Spielberg has moved away, further and further away from having to do very rigidly storyboarded sequences. I feel like early on, that's why visually those movies are so just incredible. And that as he's moved on, maybe less and less. I mean, Crystal Skull being maybe if Last Crusade is the shining jewel, where it's a magical combination of let's wing it and see what happens, and like really impressive visual stuff. I mean, like it's still Steven Spielberg. So I mean, like even if he's winging where he's going to put the camera, it's still going to look amazing. It's still going to look incredible.
Yeah, he's like a savant almost.
Yeah, he hasn't sat with it. He and the lighting crew and Dougie have not sat with images in their head about how to achieve this vision or whatever, and how to make that a little bit more, push it more.
I think there's truth to that. And I know after he started working with Kaminsky, and also just the nature of Schindler's List, that movie, he started to do this sort of documentary style and sort of run and gun thing that he had never really done it. And it is a pretty interesting thing when you watch like the World War II of Empire of the Sun and the World War II of Schindler's List, because Empire of the Sun is a good movie and it's beautifully shot, but it's like almost so pristine it kind of doesn't feel real. And also that maybe that's appropriate because it's a child's point of view. But Schindler's List has this real like you are there kind of feel, and he's for the rest of his career after that, which I think every movie since then has been with Kaminsky, he's kind of gone between this very stylized, like the hot angelic light coming in and the smooth camera, and then kind of the handheld thing for to two different degrees. I guess he doesn't do that a lot of the handheld stuff in Crystal Skull, but even in a West Side Story, he's jumping back and forth. It's like so elegant, but then there's like there's like scenes where everyone's fighting in the streets. It's pretty gritty. But yeah, when I talk about Last Crusade's visuals, by the way, I don't want to. I mean, I'm just talking about in comparison to Temple of Doom. I mean, it's an incredible looking movie. I just want to make that clear, because Temple of Doom is particularly interesting to me because it's just such a psychedelic kind of vision to it. And you compare Last Crusade to Crystal Skull, it does feel like he's a little bit off his game. And I like this Kaminsky look, to be clear. Like I really like what they're doing in Minority Report. I mean, West Side Story to me is astonishingly beautiful. Munich is great, but there was just something weird about. I don't know if it's just like overlit, or it's just like it's him working with Kaminsky instead of Slocum, or it's him. Also, just the fact there's a lot more CGI in the movie, but it's kind of not a great looking movie by Spielberg standards. By regular people's standards, it's quite good, but you know what I mean. I don't know.
Yeah, I do know what you mean, and I do think that there are shots in Last Crusade that are iconic, but I would say that there are fewer shots than, and it's hard for me to say objectively because obviously I grew up with the other two and I was in high school by the time Last Crusade came out. So it was like, I knew what was up, or I thought I did. But no, I mean, I definitely didn't, but like in terms of visually, I just feel like there are some incredible visuals in Temple of Doom that we don't see in subsequent Indiana Jones, for the most part. Yeah.
Well, just to go into Last Crusade, I want to get your feelings about okay, Sean Connery, obviously great. We don't even need to talk about it because it's just that's like some of the best buddy movie chemistry ever put on film, I think, the two of them. And it's funny because they're not even the right age difference to be father and son. I think Connery's only about 12 years older than him, but it's perfect. I mean, it's fantastic.
But impressively to me, Sean Connery didn't get bent out of place about him playing his dad or whatever, like because he had been such a virile, such amazing, like obviously unquestionably masculine man, manly man, and so I felt like perfect, honestly. And I think another actor, a different actor, may have been, you would have picked up on some kind of thing where he's
I got to do something cool,
Yeah. No. He keeps doing all this cool stuff. What about me? And I feel like Connery was kind of restrained, which is a weird thing to say about Sean Connery, but
No, it's a
like
good point. Yeah.
it's a really good performance from Connery that I felt really balanced that movie and made it really, really work. And I attribute at least some of that to Spielberg's direction, because I'm sure that he's really good at giving direction. It's wonderful seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff on some of these movies, and just hearing him give direction is like, honestly, it's like, that's a class right there. It's just how he talks to the actors and makes them understand what they're doing, gets their buy off on it. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is true. There's so much comedy that comes out of Connery, like clutching his bag and his umbrella and holding his hat on top of his head and just being so kind of out of place in the action. And that it's like there are so many people, not to mention Harrison Ford himself, who are 10, 20 years older than Sean Connery. He's 59 in that movie, who are still trying, still being the action hero in movies. So it is kind of unusual to see a person not have too much vanity about that. And then another thing that's sort of funny about my experience of watching that movie is that's my only association with Sean Connery as a little kid. I maybe knew my dad was like, he used to play James Bond. I was like, gee, really? But I never saw those movies. I never saw Goldfinger or anything. So I didn't have that kind of added layer of, this guy used to be the coolest guy ever, and now he's playing this, like, this dorky father figure. But no, it's just fantastic. I mean, there's the thing with the birds on the beach, and he's walking with his umbrella. It's like so delightful.
But I mean, I think of Sean Connery as being, I don't know. There's a whole like stereotype with leading men, where they need to be the center and everyone, is in orbit around them or whatever. And he very much stepped out of the way, very obligingly stepped out of the way and let Harrison Ford be the star, and, supported that in a wonderful way that I think makes him shine all the more. And it's something I've come to appreciate over the years. It's like, yeah, I hadn't seen many of the Sean Connery Bonds. Roger Moore was the Bond that I grew up with, which is very different. And then I did go back, and I had seen a couple of the Sean Connery Bonds, and I like those more, I guess. The Bond movies might be an interesting thing to talk about now that we're talking about Sean Connery and talking about the opening scene in
Big
Temple.
blind spot for me, man, because I have not seen a pre Daniel Craig Bond
Oh my gosh,
other than Goldfinger, which I saw many years ago and couldn't tell you a thing about.
I don't know the truth to this story. This is all rumor and whatever, but I have heard that Spielberg really, or at one point, wanted a Bond movie, and that the Broccolis did not want a Spielberg movie.
Huh. I feel like I've heard that too. Yeah.
But I mean, the Bond movies are a lot of fun. There's exciting adventure. There's a whole bunch of action. There's a little bit of romantic stuff. He's invulnerable, which is different than Indy. Indy is a highly vulnerable main character, which is one of the things I think that drew me to these movies. Is I mean, yeah. So I feel like the Bond movies, there's a little bit of something there, and Connery showing up in the third one is a great way to be like, oh, hey, it's that guy.
Yeah, no, it would be interesting to imagine Spielberg, because I think he could have done it. I mean, it's just like Christopher Nolan also, where it's like they're kind of doing their own version of it through the movies they make, and it kind of, yeah, that's a good point about Harrison Ford and his sort of vulnerability as an action hero, because there is something that is great, and I feel like is a little bit why I'm sometimes mixed on some superhero movies, or like John Wick, where they're doing really awesome balletic choreography, but it's so kind of blank, or it's so kind of I don't know, like impersonal, I guess, that it's not very exciting to me. And Ford, there's always a sense of, what's that?
No, I was gonna say it undermines stakes. If you can just get punched 20 times in the face or whatever, and it's not a big deal at all, that's one thing. But I like that, and he's totally outclassed by that big wrestler guy, except that he's got to use his brain to figure it out. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it makes it fun, and he's always has this like haggard look on his face when he's in the midst of it, and also conversely, it's fun when he has that like joyous look in Raiders when he's like running the car off the cliff and he's just beaming to himself. It's so funny to me. And then it's like when he gets really pissed off, even funnier than that. Like I love the tank scene in Last Crusade we have to talk about because that might be like my favorite. It could be in my Mount Rushmore of action set pieces in any movie. And that like Raiders.
I think that's peak stunts in the Indiana Jones series for me anyway, is that tank sequence. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god,
Absolutely.
jumping a horse to the tank. Jesus Christ. Like, oh my god. And yeah, I used to watch that over and over. Again on the little TV, I would watch that. I think that was the main one, maybe the boat chase in that movie, but that it was mainly the tank. It might be the scene I have watched more than any scene, maybe movie history, honestly, because I used to be able to
Wow.
reenact the whole thing shot for shot with my stuffed animals. I didn't film it, sadly, but I used to do it, like stage it for my brother, and I do the whole thing.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's ridiculously, I mean, yeah, I spent a lot of time watching that, and it's like, yeah, I'm sitting there with my mom after we watch the movie. I can recount each different piece of action, and it's so again, it's like that thing of having these little, because it's one thing to say like the high concept of a guy fights a tank on a horse, or a guy jumps onto a tank, but it's like there's so many of these great little things of like the guy putting up the periscope or the guy being knocked out as the periscope flips around, or Connery getting the guy in the face with the ballpoint pen. Marcus Brody joins in the fray a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
he
Yeah.
conks the guy with the uh, I guess shell casing, which again is a thing you have to be disabused of if from watching Indiana Jones as a kid, that you conk someone on the head with a gun or you punch them in the face once and they just go to sleep very peacefully. And
Mhm.
this is not medically accurate, but
Yeah.
that's funny. I used to always think that you could do that as a kid, like, oh, just hit him on the head once, he just goes to sleep. Um, yeah, so it's great. And but the thing I was getting to was Ford when he gets thrown off the tank and he's trapped on the on the thing, and they're gonna go into the rock, and he's getting like rocks are falling on his face, and the colonel is like stomping on his fingers. The look he gets, and it's also so funny how he gets out of it, which is the bullet ricochets when Marcus Brody conks the guy and kills the driver. He keels over. It's such a great like cause and effect, like Rube Goldberg thing. But the look of relief on Harrison Ford, and then the like pure rage of I'm gonna kill this motherfucker when he climbs back up and his face is covered with soot, is like so funny to me and is so great. And I don't know. And this like, yeah, visual comedy is such a thing that Spielberg is good at too. Even like Connery, the way he comes out of the tank, he looks around like this. And he's like, "You call this archaeology?" Is just it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah, Marcus he elbows Brody off the tank. Anyway, I'm just restating the entire scene, but it's so fantastic. Um,
It's an incredible sequence, and I absolutely adore. Yeah, the intricacy of it, because it's a very exciting action sequence. It's also a very funny sequence. It's a little scary sequence. Yeah, and then I mean, yeah, when Indy's climbing back up from the cliff and they're looking over the edge and everyone's sad. It's just wonderful punctuation for that whole.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. It's like it's like a Buster Keaton movie, and it's hilarious. And it ends. It's like one of the most touching scenes in Spielberg's filmography. And I think especially this is another thing that post Fablemans, this movie really, I think, hit me in a different way because of knowing about Spielberg. And I think he didn't speak to his father for 10 years or something. And
Oh wow.
there's a definitely a strange relationship at some point in his life. So I feel like even though he didn't write the movie or anything, it definitely feels like a little bit of a piece with they would make a good double feature, I guess is what I'd say. And yeah, that scene with Connery and
Yeah, I
Ford is great.
considered that. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
And it's almost like the finale of the movie gets it's a little bit like Raiders, where it's like the action thing is so thrilling that it's a little bit less exciting, but I do really like that sequence where he's going through all the challenges. I always just thought that was kind
Oh,
of cool and creative, and that epic music that Williams plays when he looks over the abyss and he has to make the leap of faith. Great stuff. Great stuff.
No, I love the puzzles. I find that on repeat viewings more and more. I appreciate like, well, it's really smart how they kind of like made a puzzle, but it's also like it's thematic too. I mean, it tells you more about the characters, you know, and tells you about
Yeah, and
yeah,
even him rediscovering his faith, you could say. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely something that as a little kid I'm watching it, I'm like, when's the tank scene? When's they're gonna fly in the plane and or when he's gonna do the birds thing, or they spin around in the fireplace. But as an adult, I'm enjoying all these quiet character things, and him on the plane with Connery, or on the blimp where they're
yeah.
just sitting and talking. He's like, well, I'm here now, what do you want to talk about? That whole thing is fantastic. Like it's a wonderful scene, and it gives you so much about their relationship. And yeah, and all those little things of like, I don't think I appreciated the puzzles, and all the little kind of uh, grave robbing sequences, sneaking around, all that stuff as much as I do now. So yeah, the whole finale is great. And then of course the whole him holding out his hand, he's trying to get the grail, is very, very touching. And the last shot, the horizon's at the bottom, I mean, just perfect.
That's like John Ford. Yeah,
Hmm.
good, good. Yeah, he learned his lesson. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, okay, I don't know if I have any. Oh, one other thing we didn't talk about is what do you think about Elsa in the movie, or really all the villains in general? Like,
Well, I'm a little biased because Elsa's right up my alley and they're very different.
Alison Duty's your kind of your type, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm rewatching. It was just like, oh, I remembered that I was attracted to this person. I did not remember I was this attracted to this person. Um, yeah, even knowing how terrible she is.
Yeah, yeah. Even though she's a Nazi, you're like, oh, yeah.
So I have a big thing about Nemesis. You know, my favorite movie of all time is Wrath of Khan, and what makes Wrath of Khan such a great movie, big part of what makes Wrath of Khan such a great movie is that Ricardo Montalban is he's such a perfect antagonist, such a great antagonist,
Oh,
and I do feel like Raiders gets a lot of terrific antagonists, and maybe that's why I like Raiders the best of this series because Belloc is such a great. He is as he states a shadowy reflection. He is, but a shadowy reflection. Yeah,
yeah. I think that's honestly the one other the thing. The visuals. I mean, I was sort of just BSing because I just Temple of Doom blew me away more as a critique of Last Crusade. The real thing I think is just like weaker is like Donovan he's like good enough. He's fine. Um, I actually think that guy was like a lot more memorable in Tar, if you remember, as the Tar's mentor, the old guy she
oh
has
right,
lunch with. I thought Julian Glover. I thought he was really great in that. But
yeah.
um, yeah, he's okay. I mean, the Nazi guy's he's fun to see him get thrown off a cliff, and I like Elsa. Okay, by the way, the whole thing right over my head, literally, maybe even till the last time I watched it, honestly, because I hadn't seen it in a while, or I just never really understood the whole thing. Well, it's a combination of not understanding it as a kid, but also you see a movie so many times, you're not like taking it in, like what's going on here, because you're just watching it kind of passively, because it's just, oh, I know this movie. So it was only like I was like, wait, oh yeah, his dad slept with Elsa. Like I didn't understand what was going on there as a little kid at all, which
Yeah, yeah, like
is
yeah,
such
when
a
she
funny part of the movie. But
that she's bedded both Joneses, both Dr. Joneses. Yeah,
yeah, that's great. And she's whispering I can't tell you how wonderful it was. And Connor's like, oh, it's quite wonderful. It's like, I know what it's so weird as a kid. Like, what the hell did I think was going on in that scene?
yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. It's great to watch things and understand them more as an adult, I guess. Um, but in terms of like villains, I don't know if I would say, I mean, I like Belloc, and I think and oddly, actually, I think Mads Mikkelsen and the new movie are both kind of nice, like foils
Yes,
for Indy. They're both kind of searching for a shadow version of what he wants.
yeah.
Um, but I don't know if I would say any of the movies are the most The villains are good. The villains are like good enough. The appeal of the movie is Indy and his buddies. I think for me, it's not like there's definitely there's no Ricardo Montalban. I don't think in any of these movies, or Heath Ledger, or you know, whatever Kevin Spacey was in the '90s, like that sort of thing. It's I think they're good. I honestly think Mola Ram is one of my favorite villains, just because that guy is so terrifying to me.
I would say that it's an incredibly powerful performance because he is terrifying. I'm still scared of Mola Ram, like honestly. Like yeah, it freaks me out. So
like everything he does, even when he does that goofy thing where he goes through the trap door, is like it gives me the like chills. I'm like freaks me out.
Yeah. No, Mola Ram's scary, but it's not in a mustache twirly, I don't know, villainous way, I guess. The way that Mads Mikkelsen and Belloc both are, I feel like. Yeah,
and that's sort of what I was talking about with the whole thing of the movies being kind of, you know, different positives in each one, because I think Marion obviously is by far the best of his romantic leads, and I think, you know, Sean Connery. It makes me wish it would have been cool if I mean, I wouldn't want Spielberg to do this because he was doing amazing stuff in the '90s that was beyond this. But if they did continue doing Indiana Jones movies, it would have been interesting to see him. You know, the way the Mission Impossible movies, where it feels like they kind of hone down to the things that really work in the series, and it's like, you know, Short Round works, Marion works, and Sean Connery, and then when they wait 20 years and they do Crystal Skull, it's a little bit of a different situation. You can't, and you know, Denholm Elliott is no longer around. By the way, that's just a great thing of bringing him into the action is part of that movie.